Now we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty of what Indians are all about.
I still say we Indian people are believers in the truth. This is the way of life that was given to your people. You're born an Indian, you're going to die an Indian. Indianness is a good life. You're facing an Indian this afternoon.
This week on Muskogee Vision, we have the final part of our Principal Chief candidate video profiles. We also take a look at the steps that Muskogee Creek Nation citizens need to take to vote absentee in this year's election. And Angel Ellis interviews Isabel Coronado on her new position at Next 100, a policy think tank organization. And Muskogee Media would like to encourage all eligible citizens to vote. Thanks for watching Muskogee Vision.
1878 Okmulgee, the Muskogee Creek Nation housed its government in their beloved council house. The federal government forced the nation to vacate the council house in 1907, but in 2010 the Creek people bought it back. Today it stands restored and back to its original glory. Come travel back in time as we tell the story of the Muskogee people before Oklahoma statehood and feel the 19th century all around you. Welcome to Muskogee Vote. Let's begin. Today's category is Ready to Vote. What are Muskogee Creek citizens eligible to do when they reach 18?
Register to vote.
Correct. What step will allow citizens to actively participate in the Muskogee Creek Nation?
Register to vote.
Correct. If you are a Muskogee Creek citizen, age 18 or above, please register online or call for more information. And thank you for watching Muskogee Vote.
If you, like me, will read the Treaty of 1866, you will see where it clearly points out that the freedmen and their descendants are citizens of the Muskogee Nation and have every right that each of us have and should have. I believe in inclusion, not exclusion. I do not understand anyone who tries to exclude someone from the Muskogee Nation. We are all citizens of the nation, and we should all be treated equally. Thank you.
As you well know, per our Constitution, it does state that in order to be a citizen, you have to be a citizen by blood. And as my duty as an elected official, that I would have to abide by the Constitution.
As you know, the Principal Chief of the Muskogee Creek Nation has to adhere to and also follow the laws of the Muskogee Creek Nation. This is something that I know is being asked all the time about the freedmen. In 1979, there was a referendum to disenroll them. This is another question that has to be addressed at some point in time. There is a process in place, and I believe that process can be changed, but it's going to take the efforts of the people that or freedmen, and to advocate for that. I think that right now, as the law stands, that I would have to support the law that says that the Constitution of the Creek Nation, that in order for you to be a citizen, you have to be by blood. And so as a chief, that's one thing that I would have to follow.
I maintain the current standards. I support the current standards of our citizenship for the Muskogee Creek Nation by descendancy to the Dawes rolls, and I say that because, again, as a political entity, it is in our best interest to maintain our cultural identity of the Muskogee people. And so, therefore, it wouldn't be in our best interest to allow people who are not part of our lineage, part of the Muskogee Creek Nation lineage, to be a part of this nation, to be a part of the membership. So I support maintaining descendancy in our as citizenship of the Muskogee Creek Nation. I support maintaining descendancy to the Dawes Rolls as citizenship of the Muskogee Creek Nation. Again, we would be talking about an amendment to the Constitution. So I support that process. I support, again, if that is the will of the people, to change the Constitution to allow freedmen as members of the Muskogee Creek Nation, then I would support that process of it being initiated by the National Council and then being voted on by the people. Again, that is not up to one individual. That is not up to one position, the principal chief. That is up to the people. And I would definitely support that process. But again, my personal stance is to maintain our current standards of membership within the Muskogee Creek Nation.
I will always support, always have, and always will support admittance of any citizen that can prove that they are a citizen by blood, which means they would have to be on the Dawes Roll. As long as they're on the Dawes Roll, they are eligible to be a citizen regardless of where they live, what other ethnic backgrounds they may have. And at this point in time, that's all I can answer on that, because we are actively in litigation over this issue.
Well, it's in our Constitution. Our Constitution is already written. In the Constitution, of course, the Creek Nation itself is Amendment 3, Article 4 itself, where it states that our citizens itself, of course, are 4/4, 2 1/4 itself, of course, to hold office. And citizens below that bloodline itself, of course, they will be, they have all the rights and benefits itself, of course, of Creek Nation.
My position on admitting freedmen descendants into the Muskogee Creek Nation is this. In 1979, the freedmen were kicked off the rolls of the Creek Nation, and at that time, we had a new constitution ratified that stated only citizens by blood that could trace their ancestry back to the Dawes Roll could be considered a citizen. And the problem with that is that I know many freedmen have Creek blood, but they were put on the freedmen roll back whenever the Dawes Commission was doing their work. And so we have that part of the citizens, freedmen that should be citizens. And then we also have the fact that the Dawes rolls are not infallible. I mean, humans can make mistakes, and they often did on the Dawes roll. And so to base a citizenship off of the Dawes roll only is also cause for mistakes. And so I believe that the freedmen could have their own tribal town, and then did in fact have a tribal town at one time. And so any of those descendants or any of the people who were on the rolls in 1979 and were kicked off, I believe could be put back on the rolls. And I would support having a question put on a ballot and put it to a vote of the people, because again, this is a constitutional requirement that all citizens be based on blood and traced back to the Dawes rolls. So this would have to be put to a vote of the people, which I would support doing that.
My position is that I had to prove that I was a Creek citizen. I had to prove my lineage back to someone that was on the Dawes roll. Same thing here. We created our new Constitution when we had the right to self-governance again in the 70s. And in that Constitution, we defined who's a member of our tribe. And it has been that way since the beginning of time, since time immemorial. You had to prove that you were born to a Creek woman, that you're a descendant from a Creek woman. Now you have to be a descendant from a Creek person that signed up on the rolls. But we all come from a tribal town. I'll come from Weelgufki. So I followed my grandmother, my Muskogee Creek grandmother from Weelgufki. So, and my dad did. Now my mother is not Creek, so we have to follow the grandmother. But for time immemorial, that's how it's been. That's where you receive your tribal town. So for these freedmen to come in, why are they not having to prove their Creek blood when I have to prove my Creek blood? I have 2 granddaughters that have not gotten enrolled in the Creek Nation because the current enrollment office says there's a problem or something going on with their dad's father's side. Well, just go off my blood. They can prove my blood. So even that side, they can prove his blood. But they said there's a discrepancy in one of them. So they just flat out refuse to enroll either one of them. So everyone has to prove it by blood. And if that Constitution from 1866 is what everyone hinges on, then what about the rest of that treaty? I'm sorry I said Constitution, but that treaty. So I know right now there's a lawsuit. They've taken it to D.C. I heard it's going to be remanded back to the lower court so we can make an opinion here. They can go through with it. They can follow it through. But my position is that you have to be Creek by blood.
And again, I refer back to the Constitution, which requires citizenship to be of quarter-degree blood quantum, that we would be descendants of those that are on the rolls, the 1906 rolls.
The treaty with the Creeks in 1866 is kind of an authority on this issue. The Muskogee Creek Nation was punished for essentially siding with the Confederacy during the Civil War. Lands were taken from the Muskogee Creek Nation to provide for other Indian tribes, among other things. I'd like to at this time read to you Article 2 of this treaty. And inasmuch as there are among the Creeks many persons of African descent who have no interest in the soil, it is stipulated that hereafter these persons lawfully residing in said Creek country under their laws and usages, or who have been residing in said country, may return within 1 year from the ratification of this treaty, and their descendants and such others of the same race as may be permitted by the laws of said nation to settle within the limits of the jurisdiction of the Creek Nation as citizens thereof, shall have and enjoy all the rights and privileges of native citizens, including an equal interest in the soil and national funds, and the laws of said nation shall be equally binding upon and give equal protection to all such persons. And I'll stop there. I don't know why the 1979 Constitution ignored the treaty language and instead got into this blood quantum thing. I've asked a lot of people about it, and it's still, as you know, a very volatile topic. There's strong feelings on both sides of the issue. I am not supportive of the politics of exclusion and believe we the people were all created equally. I further believe in the biblical notion of love one another. It has been harmful and hurtful to see how this issue has played out in other tribal governments in Oklahoma. I don't believe the monetary cost of exclusion is worth the resulting internal damage and harm.
Are you a Creek citizen who votes absentee and has questions about how to do so? Here's the official process. It's important to note that your absentee ballot is required to be filled out in secret. When you receive your absentee ballot in the mail, it will contain 2 envelopes, a return envelope and an absentee ballot envelope. Once you have completed your ballot, it is placed in the absentee ballot envelope, which is then placed in the return envelope. Once you have opened your ballot, make sure you take time to review each district, and remember that you can only vote for 1 candidate per district or office. To vote, mark your ballot by completely filling in the oval to the left of your choice using only blue or black ink. After marking your ballot, refold it in the same manner as it was received, and place it in the envelope labeled Absentee Ballot Muskogee Creek Nation Election. Once your ballot is inside, completely seal this envelope and place it in the white return envelope labeled Muskogee Creek Nation Primary Election. Before the return envelope is sealed, sign the certification that you marked your ballot in secret. Ballots that have not been certified in this manner will not be accepted. All that is left to do then is mail the postage-paid envelope, and remember, hand-delivered ballots will not be accepted. For more information on voting absentee, visit www.mcn-nsn.gov/services/election board. Voter registration opens for the general election September 24th. The deadline for absentee voter registration for the general election is Wednesday, October 9th. Absentee ballots for the general election will need to be received by the Okmulgee Post Office by November 2nd at 11 a.m. The number for the election board office is 918-732-7631, or you can email them at election@mcn-nsn.gov.
According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, Native Americans are incarcerated at a rate 38% higher than the national average. Native American men are incarcerated 4 times more than white men, and Native American women are incarcerated at 6 times the rate of white women. With such daunting statistics, it's no surprise that many Native American youth feel invisible. Muskogee Creek citizen Isabel Coronado has overcome the statistics and is now working to change those numbers.
Hey Jay, my name is Isabel Coronado, and since my last interview over Champions for Change launch, I've since graduated with my master's in public health from OSU, and I just started my first job at the Next 100 in New York City. So I just moved from Oklahoma to New York City for this new think tank that's going on here in New York.
Oh, can you tell us a little bit about Next 100? I'm pretty curious about, I've looked at the website, but everybody watching is going to want to know what that's all about.
Okay, so the Next 100 is a startup think tank that was created by the Century Foundation for their 100-year anniversary. And instead of having some party or some other way to celebrate, they decided to throw some money at this new program called the Next 100. And we are technically a think tank, but we're more than just a think tank. Yes, we do policy and research, but we're out there actively trying to get our policy enacted either on the federal side or on the state side.
Okay, that's pretty cool. How did you first get involved? What drew you there to the Next 100?
So I got involved by someone who saw my work and was at a conference and just doing networking, and they said, hey, this really awesome opportunity, you should look into it. And when I was looking into it, it really spoke to me about the language they used, about how they're looking to do progressive change, and by having it be led by people who are personally impacted by the issues. So I thought the next step in what I was already doing was to get into the policy world and make change on that front.
Can you give us some insights into how the policies that you are working with, what your personal avenue is in that? Because you talked a little bit about the Next 100 and how people who have personal stakes in the game in perspective can be impactful. But tell us a little bit about your background for those who might not already have caught our previous coverage.
Yeah, so my background is that I come from I was raised by a single Indigenous mother, and where she was an amazing mother, but there was this big shift when I was 7 years old where she was arrested and sent to prison for a couple years. But during her time, she realized 2 things: that 1, she needs to make education a priority, and 2, she needs to be my role model and really step up. So that's exactly what she did when she was released from prison. She first decided to go to law school, then after served as an attorney for the Creek Reintegration Center.
Awesome.
Yes, that's fun.
It's an award-winning program, too. We've seen that program really grow and be recognized for the work that they've done, too.
Yes, amazing work.
Has she ever talked to you about what those minor little things that really shifted her thoughts in the law would have been? Like, did she see instances where she felt like people who were underserved in education or things like that were vulnerable to that pattern?
Yeah, so definitely by the environment where she was living in and the people she was surrounding herself with really influenced the way that she was thinking at the time and the things that she was doing. And with her time in prison, she read incredibly a lot because there's not much else to do when you're sitting there and you're so far away from your kid. But I think it was really the turning point is when she was coming out of prison. It's like, what am I going to do now? I can't go back to what I was doing. Obviously, that's not working. And interesting enough, she wanted to become an attorney. This is where she saw the lack and the need for more Indigenous attorneys to step up and serve their communities.
Can you give us some insights? I know that you've been working with this topic for a while, like on just what those statistics might look like for Indigenous people in incarceration. Do you have any good data to share?
Yeah, I definitely do. Always have the data on hand. So first off, I just want to give the bigger picture as Oklahoma overall that Oklahoma surpassed Louisiana in incarcerating more people than anywhere else in the world. And that's because Louisiana enacted policies, whereas Oklahoma, we still are faulting in that area. So that means 1 in every 100 Oklahomans are either in prison or in jail. But for the Native American side, for the Indigenous women, that disparity is really high, where for Native women, it's almost 3 times the rate than any other race that are being incarcerated. So then that impacts children of incarcerated parents. When the women go away, the children are either go with family members or go into the foster care system. And children of incarcerated parents have a 7 times more likelihood of entering the justice system as well.
Lot. Wow, those are some staggering statistics too. Like it's a lot of things working when people are trying to find their launch point in life. Those are a lot of elements working against them. I read a little bit about an article that you wrote in Teen Vogue. Can you tell us about that article?
Yeah, so that was an amazing opportunity through the Center for Native American Youth. Teen Vogue reached out to them, which had each of their champions for change in 2018 write a piece about what they were working on. And in that article, I really just wanted to encompass my story and how it related to the work I was doing in Oklahoma with the American Indian Criminal Justice Navigation Council, and really get out that program because we were a new program and not many people knew too much about it. So I was really trying to get more people interested and even know that be aware that is even what's going on.
Yeah. In that article, you referenced re-entry programs. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so the re-entry program I was specifically talking about was the American Indian Criminal Justice Navigation Council, which is a program that was founded by David Littleson, and it was meant to equip ex-offenders with information about the justice system and turn around and help other incarcerated people understand their rights, roles, and responsibilities. And this helped them become active participants in their case, because something that was happening is when we're at this high population, there's not too many people that can sit there and really explain to you what's going on with your case when DAs are trying to do what they're doing and public defenders are so just have so much on their caseload. That's where these people would really cover that gap and make sure people were educated.
Mm-hmm. I work covering a lot of legal cases and through journalism, and I sit through court dockets, and you can see that a lot of times people are showing up they are already in custody, and they've met their lawyer for the first time at a preliminary hearing, and really it often seems like there's this like sidebar 2-minute discussion on some very important decisions in their lives. And it's really great that there are folks out there working to make sure that, just because somebody is in a position where they've, might have gone to jail, they might be in custody, someone's advocating on their behalf, because this isn't a forever state. It's not Like that's the end all be all. There's life after that. And I was wondering if you could kind of give us some insights into what reentry programs might try to do for that citizen who's coming out of incarceration. Like, what are some of those rebuilding steps that people go through? I mean, obviously your mom went through some things, but what's that process like? I mean, you were a child at the time, but has she ever spoke to you about the difficulty of overcoming that?
Yes, and it's still impacting her to this day with having a record. But one of the things is housing, how to get back into getting your education, transportation, paying back legal fees or just fees that you owe back to the courts. There's so much that goes into when a person is coming out of prison and the resources that they need coming out. Something that Reintegration Center does a really good job on is that they built housing centers for people coming out, and they can live there for amount of time. And that's even just that's a really big need, and finding jobs that will still let you work even with a record is very important. And of course, another thing is getting back your kids. It can be kind of a challenge at sometimes when you're trying to get your kids back, whether from the foster care system or the parenting classes you have to take to gain those rights back.
Okay. And can you give us just like kind of a broad insight into what your next maybe like year is going to look like as you're working for Next 100? Like, what are your first steps and goals?
So my first step in goals is to do the research that in the covering gaps that aren't there, so it can really push forward my policies that I'm trying to get passed. And of course, I'm always trying to brainstorm new ideas and innovative ways that can help move this issue to the forefront and get it solved. I'm not just looking at the federal level, but I am trying to help Oklahoma, my home state, with this issue. So really just educating myself that's the best if I can, and just being using my background as my leading way to make these changes.
Awesome. Well, I think that's about all the questions I've gathered up. Do you have anything you wanted to leave us with? Anything I might have missed?
Yeah. So I know there was I wanted to also mention about if people are following the stories and what kind of message I want to send out to the Creek citizens watching, or just anybody else watching. I just want to say, even policymakers, first off is don't forget about the indigenous people of Oklahoma. Don't forget about the indigenous people, period, just in the U.S., but also to those people formerly incarcerated, like use your voice to speak up to these policy people, and using your stories about the injustices or ways to create solutions to these issues. And then lastly, to the Native youth to vote. That's the easiest way to do policy, especially in our tribal elections coming up, but as well as the presidential election that's happening as well.